Hello and welcome to the latest issue of The Rationalist. First off, I want to thank you for last week's comments. I got a lot of great comments. People really liked that video, so that's great. Thank you. And today we're going to talk about recycling. Now, recycling is one that's thrown in your face every day. And everybody knows we need to recycle and we all know why. So we're not going to go into that kind of stuff. But at the end of this video, I'm going to give you a solution that you haven't heard before. And since it's at the end, no cheating and jumping ahead. So first, let's talk about what we recycle. You clean things out, you put them in the bin, and when it gets to the recycling center, the vast majority of metals are recycled. They're taken out easily, especially if they're ferrous metal that a magnet can pick up, but they're recycled because they're economically viable. It makes a lot of sense. So that's great. The metals are really reused. Paper is often, although not always, reused and recycled to turn into paper again. But even if it's not, it's kind of like food. It may not smell good, and nobody wants to live next to a landfill, but it's biodegradable. And so paper and food are not a problem if they're not recycled. Obviously, they don't recycle the food, but paper is not a problem because it is biodegradable and we're okay there, as long as we're not incinerating it, which does sometimes happen. The big problem is plastics. And so you're spending all this time separating things out, which is good. You're cleaning off your plastics, it's all good, and you send them off and you feel good about yourself because of what you've done. But what if, of all the plastic that you put out there, only 10% of it was recycled? Well, that's a fact. That's what's happening. You're spending all this time on doing your separating and cleaning and all that kind of stuff, and it's not doing you much good. Plastic bottles are being recycled, and even then, not at 100% rate. But 90% of plastic is not recycled. So what happens? It goes to landfill, or even worse, well, I don't know if it's worse, gets incinerated. Both are bad. So why is this happening? Well, it's because your recycling facilities do not have the ability to recycle those kind of plastics. But they didn't tell you that, did they? No, they didn't. So it's something to think about. So let's talk a little bit about some of these plastics and why this happens. First off, ever get takeout food from a restaurant? Yeah, probably comes in something like this, called a clamshell, styrofoam. These are never recycled. Never. They're not recycled. They're not recyclable. Nobody has the facilities to do it. So why do we keep using these? Some places have gone to cardboard and stuff. These are not recyclable. Let your restaurant know that you don't want them in those. Let's talk about some of the packaging that's out there. So here's something I bought the other day from the drugstore. Little bitty bottle, and it's put in this outside packaging. So let's open it up. And inside is the product. And it only uses up half of the space. The other half is not used. So you think, well, this can get recycled because it's paper. Well, you're right, but look at this. A piece of plastic on it that's integrated into it and can't be pulled out easily. So this probably does not get recycled. Goes to a landfill. All right? Here we have the actual product, and it's in a plastic bottle, and I don't have a solution for something that's better than this plastic bottle. But we need to do better. Think about this. I'm told, and I've never seen this, but I'm told that in a lot of stores in Germany, if you go in there, they'll have the packaging like this, but they'll have 100 bottles of this and one of these. And you look at this and decide if you want it, and then just buy this. Think about it. Your toothpaste. When you buy a tube of toothpaste, it comes in a paper carton, doesn't it? Why? You're just going to throw that out. Suppose every product was like that. They had one packaging item on the shelf, and the rest was just what you needed. And every item that you buy had a barcode on it. And everybody now these days, QR codes, you take your phone, you scan it, and all the information comes up. So everybody can do that today. Why do we need packaging like this? We don't. It's wasteful, it's unnecessary, and it would save everybody money if they didn't do it. So we need to push for that type of thing. Let me go back for a minute to talking about these plastics and the recyclable problems. Basically what you're doing with plastics to recycle them is you're melting them. And because you're working with vast amounts of them, you can't just go, okay, this one and this one, I'll melt these separately, and then no, it doesn't work. You take all your plastics and you melt them all down. And when you do that, you get phase separation. So it's kind of like oil and water. They separate out. And that means that you can't take them as they are, that lunk that you get from it, and recycle that. What it means is because of the way they separate, you've got to take virgin plastic material, new stuff, and add it to the old stuff every time you create something new. So even there, you're only partially recycling, but the dirty little secret is you can only do this 2 or 3 times and then the plastic is unusable. So we've just got to cut back on plastic use in general. And let's try and get a handle on how much waste is out there. So I live in upstate New York. The biggest city in the nation is in downstate New York City. I could give you some figures on the amount of garbage that is produced in the United States every day or every year, but it's like the national debt. The figures are so large you can't get your head around them. So let's use New York City as an example. New York City produces 12,000 tons of garbage every day. Yeah, and that's something like 14 million tons a year. I can hardly get my head around those numbers. They're so huge. So what does New York do with all this? Well, they used to, a long time ago, dump it into the ocean. Thank God they're not doing that anymore. But they had been sending most of it to the Fresh Kills landfill, but that filled up back in 2001. So now it all goes way outside New York City. Where does it go? Well, it goes to Kentucky, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, and New York. And here in the Finger Lakes region that we live in, over a third of New York City's garbage comes to us. And we have 3 landfills in Monroe, Ontario, and Seneca counties that are the 3 largest landfills in the state. So you think you're getting, our own stuff sent into these, but we're taking New York City garbage and other places, and huge, vast amounts of it. And nobody wants this. Nobody wants to live in it, live near it, NIMBY, not in my backyard, and who can blame them? So this is kind of the scope of the problem and why we need to do more recycling. But the recycling centers, they don't tell you that they can't recycle your plastic. So it does go into these landfills and or is incinerated. So these are some real problems. Okay, now you've got New York City picking up all this garbage and sending it to all sorts of places around the Northeast, but particularly my backyard. They have about 2,500 garbage trucks in New York to pick up all this garbage. And they take it to transfer stations. And then from the transfer stations, it goes on to large 18-wheelers and then is transported to all these different areas. So think about this for a minute. You've got trucks which run on fossil fuels. You burn those fossil fuels and you're polluting the air. And most of them are diesel, but diesel or gas, doesn't matter, they both pollute. Diesel's a little worse. But you're polluting the air in order to transport garbage to places where you can pollute the land. None of that makes a lot of sense, does it? If you just take it to these transfer stations and make them the recycling centers, and you don't transfer it further, you do better. So this leads me to my solution of sorts. And that is, let's suppose we passed a law. And the law said, every county in the United States, you have to take care of all your own garbage within your county limits. So you cannot transport any waste outside of your county lines. Well, let's go back to New York City. Think about Manhattan and the Bronx. They don't have room for landfills. They could have room for recycling plants, but again, not much. There'd be a huge uproar. Oh, we can't do this. We want to send our garbage out to other people. No, let's pass a law that says you have to do this. Now, you've got to give them some time, so 5 years, maybe 6 years for planning, but say on this date, we're not going to let you ship anything outside of your county limits. And what would happen? Well, we have the ability, the technical know-how to recycle most all plastics and most all things. So if there are just a few that you can't handle, well, then you stop producing those. But for all the rest, you recycle them properly. You build the facilities to do it. This can be done, and let's think about this. The population in the United States, unfortunately, continues to grow. Open areas, land space continues to shrink. It might be 150 years from now, but sooner or later, you're going to have to either start dumping in the ocean again, obviously we don't want that, or you're going to have recycling centers where you do actually recycle everything. It's coming anyway, it's just a matter of time. Let's do it sooner instead of later and stop polluting our land and our air, because some of this stuff is incinerated also. It's an interesting thought. Now, there'd be, ifs, ands, and buts, things like, well, if you're a county that has less than, and I don't know what it is, less than 300,000 people, just to pick a figure, then, okay, building your own recycling center isn't efficient. It isn't economically viable, so we'll let you combine with another neighboring county, and the 2 of you, or the 3 of you, or the 4 of you can share that way. But if you have, again, I don't know what the number is, 300, 400, 500,000 people or more within your county, you cannot transport waste outside. I tell you, we'd figure out this recycling thing real quick, wouldn't we? And we could do it. And we'd start having to take some of this waste and build it, make it into roads and make it into all sorts of things. Again, it would cost a little bit more, but we're going to have to do it sooner or later. And can you put a price on the environment? I mean, there are certain things that you can say, well, that's too expensive, but we've just got to stop using all these plastics. So, there's a thought for you. It'll make the New York City people scream. Maybe anybody in a big city, but I think you can see the logic in it. I think it's rational, but I'm the rationalist, so help me out with this. Do me a favor, like this, subscribe to it, let your friends know. Thank you for watching. We'll have something new for you next week.